The acrid smell of burning metal and concrete filled the air as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos pressed her back against the crumbling wall. Her radio crackled with desperate voices. Her ranger unit was pinned down, ammunition running low, and enemy forces closing in from 3 directions. In that moment, with smoke obscuring everything beyond 10 feet and the lives of 12 soldiers hanging in the balance, Maria had to make a choice that would either save them all or seal their fate. What happened next in those smoke-filled streets of a war-torn city would become the stuff of military legend, but it started with one woman's split-second decision to ignore orders and trust her instincts. This is the true story of how a single act of courage in the face of impossible odds changed not just the outcome of a battle, but the very definition of what it means to lead under fire. The desert sun had barely risen over the horizon when Staff Sergeant Maria Santos received the briefing that would change her life forever. She sat in the makeshift command tent at Forward Operating Base Crimson, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. Around her, 12 Rangers from the 75th Ranger Regiment listened as Colonel Davidson outlined their mission with the kind of precision that only comes from years of military experience. The intelligence was clear but concerning. Enemy forces had taken control of a strategic intersection in the city of Al-Rashid, a crucial supply route that coalition forces needed to maintain their operations in the region. What made this particular mission different was the civilian population still trapped in the surrounding buildings. Standard protocol would be to call in air support and level the area. But with innocent lives at stake, boots on the ground were the only option. Maria studied the satellite images spread across the folding table before her. The intersection formed a perfect crossroads, with 4-story buildings on each corner providing excellent vantage points for enemy snipers and machine gun nests. The streets were narrow, typical of the old city architecture, which would limit their movement options and make them vulnerable to ambush. What worried her most was the intelligence gap. They knew approximately 30 enemy fighters controlled the area, but exact positions and weaponry remained unknown. The mission parameters were straightforward on paper, but complex in execution. They would insert via helicopter at dawn, establish overwatch positions on the rooftops, neutralize enemy resistance, and secure the intersection for incoming supply convoys. Extraction would occur once the area was confirmed clear, and coalition engineers could begin reinforcing the position. Standard operating procedure estimated mission duration at 4 to 6 hours. As Colonel Davidson dismissed the briefing, Maria gathered her squad leaders for additional planning. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, her most experienced NCO, expressed concerns about the urban environment and limited escape routes. Corporal Johnson, their communications specialist, worried about maintaining contact with base operations given the dense building structures that could interfere with radio signals. These were legitimate tactical considerations that Maria took seriously. The equipment check that followed was thorough and methodical. Each ranger inspected their primary weapon, sidearm, ammunition, medical supplies, and communications gear with the kind of attention to detail that separates elite units from regular infantry. Maria carried her trusted M4 carbine, the same weapon that had served her faithfully through 2 previous deployments. Her kit included extra magazines, fragmentation grenades, smoke canisters, and a battlefield medical pack that she hoped never to use on her own people. The helicopter ride to the insertion point was eerily quiet. 13 Rangers sat in contemplative silence, each processing the mission ahead in their own way. Some checked their equipment for the 100th time. Others stared out the small windows at the landscape passing below, and a few closed their eyes in what might have been prayer or simply an attempt to center themselves before battle. Maria used the time to review contingency plans and mentally rehearse potential scenarios they might encounter. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom as they approached the landing zone. Intelligence had selected a relatively secure area approximately 1 kilometer from their objective, far enough to avoid immediate detection, but close enough to reach their target on foot within reasonable time. The desert terrain gave way to urban sprawl as they descended, revealing a city that bore the scars of ongoing conflict. Smoke columns rose from various points across the landscape, evidence of the larger war that surrounded their specific mission. Touchdown was smooth and professional. The Rangers disembarked quickly and efficiently, immediately establishing a perimeter while the helicopter departed. The sudden silence that followed its departure was almost overwhelming after hours of engine noise. Maria signaled her team to begin movement toward their objective, using hand signals to maintain operational security. The early morning air was cool but promised another scorching day ahead. The approach to Al-Rashid revealed a city caught between past and present. Ancient architecture showed bullet holes and blast damage from recent fighting, while modern elements like satellite dishes and electrical lines created an urban maze that complicated navigation. Civilians were notably absent from the streets, a clear indication that word of impending military action had spread through the community networks that always seemed to know more than official intelligence sources. As they moved through the narrow streets, Maria maintained constant communication with her squad leaders through tactical radios. The urban environment created challenges for their standard patrol formations, forcing them to adapt movement techniques learned in training to the reality of confined spaces and limited visibility. Each intersection required careful reconnaissance before crossing. Each alley demanded attention to potential ambush sites. The first sign of trouble came from Corporal Martinez, their point man, who reported movement in a building 2 blocks ahead of their position. Through binoculars, Maria observed what appeared to be an enemy observation post in a 3rd-floor window. The figure was partially concealed, but the distinctive outline of a weapon was visible. This intelligence matched their briefings about enemy surveillance networks designed to provide early warning of coalition movements. The tactical situation required immediate adjustment. Maria ordered her teams to take cover while she assessed options for dealing with the observation post. Direct engagement would alert every enemy fighter in the area to their presence, potentially compromising the entire mission before they reached their primary objective. Alternative routes were limited due to the urban geography and would add significant time to their approach, potentially affecting coordination with other coalition units. After consulting with her squad leaders, Maria decided to continue with the planned route while maintaining heightened alertness for additional enemy positions. The observation post would be neutralized during their assault on the main objective, rather than risk premature contact. This decision reflected the kind of tactical thinking that had earned her respect among the Rangers and confidence from her superiors. The final approach to their objective area required crossing an open square that provided no cover or concealment. Intelligence photos had shown this area from overhead, but ground-level perspective revealed additional complications. Debris from previous battles created obstacles that could provide cover for enemy fighters, while damaged vehicles and abandoned market stalls offered numerous hiding places that had not been visible in satellite imagery. Maria positioned her overwatchers on the surrounding rooftops as planned, but modified their fields of fire to account for the actual terrain conditions. Communication between teams became crucial as they prepared to advance across the exposed ground. Each ranger understood their role in the complex choreography of urban combat, where split-second timing and precise coordination could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The intersection ahead looked deceptively quiet in the morning light. 4-story buildings dominated each corner as expected, their windows dark and seemingly empty. Street-level shops and cafes showed signs of hasty abandonment, with chairs and tables scattered and merchandise left behind. But Maria's instincts, honed by years of combat experience, told her that enemy eyes were watching their every move from concealed positions throughout the area. As her team prepared for the final phase of their approach, Maria reviewed the rules of engagement one more time with her squad leaders. Civilian casualties were to be avoided at all costs, but her rangers had the right to defend themselves against hostile action. The challenge lay in distinguishing between combatants and non-combatants in an environment where the lines were often deliberately blurred by enemy tactics. The radio check with base operations confirmed that supporting units were in position and ready to provide assistance if required. Medical evacuation helicopters were on standby at predetermined locations, and quick reaction forces were available if the situation deteriorated beyond her team's ability to handle. These safeguards provided some comfort, but Maria knew that once they initiated contact with enemy forces, her rangers would be largely on their own until the immediate tactical situation was resolved. The moment of commitment arrived as Maria gave the signal to begin their assault on the intersection. Her overwatchers reported ready status from their elevated positions, providing crucial surveillance of potential enemy movement. The assault teams moved forward with practiced precision, using available cover while maintaining mutual support. Everything that could be planned had been planned, but Maria understood that combat has a way of making even the best preparations inadequate. The first shots rang out just as her lead elements reached the edge of the intersection, confirming what her instincts had already told her. Enemy fighters were indeed waiting in prepared positions, and her rangers were about to face a battle that would test every aspect of their training and determination. The mission to secure a simple intersection was about to become something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The crack of sniper fire shattered the morning quiet like thunder, and Corporal Jenkins dropped behind a concrete barrier just as the bullet sparked off the pavement where he had been standing. Maria's radio exploded with reports from her overwatchers as muzzle flashes erupted from windows throughout the intersection. The carefully planned approach had just become a desperate fight for survival. Enemy automatic weapons opened up from at least 6 different positions, creating interlocking fields of fire that trapped her assault teams in the open square. The intelligence estimate of 30 fighters now seemed conservative, as Maria counted muzzle flashes from windows, doorways, and rooftop positions. Her rangers immediately began returning fire while seeking whatever cover the urban landscape provided, but the enemy had clearly spent considerable time preparing defensive positions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos on the radio, reporting that his Overwatch team was taking heavy fire from a machine gun position in the northeast building. The distinctive sound of a PKM machine gun echoed off the surrounding structures, its heavy bullets chewing chunks out of the concrete walls that provided his team's only protection. Maria could see traces streaking across the intersection like deadly fireworks, creating a light show that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Her assault teams were pinned down in positions that offered minimal protection, while enemy fighters maintained the high ground advantage from prepared positions. The narrow streets that had concerned her during planning now became death traps, channeling movement into predetermined kill zones that the enemy had obviously established well in advance of their arrival. Corporal Johnson, their communications specialist, had managed to establish contact with base operations despite the interference from surrounding buildings. His report painted a grim picture of their situation. But Colonel Davidson's response was immediate and reassuring. Close air support was being scrambled, and additional ground units were moving to establish blocking positions around the area to prevent enemy reinforcement or escape. The problem with air support in this situation was the time factor and the proximity of civilian structures. Even with precision-guided munitions, the risk of collateral damage in such a dense urban environment meant that pilots would need extensive coordination before engaging targets. Maria estimated at least 20 minutes before aircraft could effectively intervene, an eternity in combat where seconds felt like hours. Private First Class Thompson, one of her youngest rangers, had taken a bullet through his left shoulder while attempting to reach better cover. The wound wasn't life-threatening, but it effectively removed him from the fight and required one of his team members to provide medical assistance. This reduced her effective fighting strength just when she needed every available weapon system engaged against enemy positions. Maria made the difficult decision to consolidate her forces rather than continue the planned assault. The enemy's defensive preparation was far more sophisticated than intelligence had indicated, and continuing to advance across the intersection under current conditions would likely result in casualties she couldn't accept. Her rangers began a fighting withdrawal to more defensible positions while maintaining suppressive fire on known enemy locations. The retreat was complicated by the urban geography that had initially concerned her planners. Streets that seemed wide enough for vehicle traffic became narrow corridors under enemy observation, while alleyways that might provide concealed movement routes were blocked by debris or led to dead ends. Every movement required careful coordination between fire teams to ensure that someone was always providing covering fire for those who were moving. Sergeant First Class Martinez reported from his position that he had identified what appeared to be an enemy command element in a fourth-floor window of the southwest building. Through his rifle scope, he could see figures with radio equipment and what looked like range cards for coordinating defensive fires. Taking out this position might disrupt enemy coordination, but it would require exposing himself to fire from multiple other positions. The sound of incoming mortar rounds added a new dimension to the battle. The enemy had indirect fire support, something that intelligence had not detected during their preparation. The first rounds fell short, impacting in the square where her assault teams had been just minutes earlier. But Maria knew that subsequent rounds would be adjusted onto target as enemy observers corrected their fire. Her overwatches were proving invaluable in this situation, providing surveillance of enemy positions that weren't visible to the assault teams at street level. Staff Sergeant Williams reported from his rooftop position that enemy fighters were moving between buildings using internal passages, constantly shifting their positions to avoid return fire. This mobility made it difficult to suppress specific threats and suggested a level of preparation that went beyond simple defensive positions. The radio chatter from base operations indicated that the situation was being monitored at higher command levels. Additional resources were being allocated to support her mission. But Maria understood that ultimate responsibility for her rangers' lives rested with her tactical decisions. No amount of external support could substitute for sound leadership under fire. As the firefight continued, Maria noticed patterns in enemy fire that suggested they were conserving ammunition while maintaining psychological pressure on her positions. Long bursts of automatic fire would be followed by periods of single, precisely aimed shots designed to keep her rangers pinned down without expending excessive resources. This disciplined approach to ammunition management indicated experienced fighters rather than the poorly trained militia they had initially expected. The civilian factor remained a constant concern throughout the engagement. While no non-combatants were visible in the immediate area, surrounding buildings showed signs of habitation, and Maria had to assume that innocent people were sheltering nearby. This complicated her rules of engagement and limited her options for using more aggressive tactics to break the stalemate. Private Lopez, their medic, had established a casualty collection point in a protected alcove between two buildings. In addition to treating Thompson's shoulder wound, he was preparing medical supplies for additional casualties that seemed inevitable given their tactical situation. His calm professionalism under fire reflected the quality of training that made Rangers effective in precisely these circumstances. The sound of approaching aircraft provided the first hope for breaking the deadlock. Maria could hear the distinctive whine of jet engines in the distance, indicating that close air support was finally arriving on station. Coordination with the pilots would require precise target identification and careful management of friendly positions to avoid fratricide incidents. Corporal Johnson established contact with the flight leader, call sign Viper 11, and began the complex process of coordinating airstrikes in close proximity to friendly forces. The pilots needed detailed information about enemy positions, friendly locations, and any restrictions based on civilian considerations. This coordination process was time-consuming but essential for effective and safe employment of air power. The first airstrike targeted the machine gun position that had been causing the most problems for Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's Overwatch team. Maria watched through binoculars as the precision munition impacted exactly on target, eliminating the threat and creating a visible gap in enemy defensive fire. The psychological effect on enemy fighters was immediate, as their rate of fire decreased noticeably following the demonstration of American air power. However, the airstrike also had the unintended consequence of alerting every enemy fighter in the area to the presence of American forces. Radio intercepts suggested that reinforcements were being called in, and Maria's tactical situation might actually worsen if additional enemy fighters arrived before she could consolidate her position or complete her mission. The battle was evolving beyond the parameters of her original mission briefing. What had been planned as a straightforward operation to secure an intersection was becoming a complex urban engagement, involving multiple enemy positions, civilian considerations, and the need to coordinate various supporting elements. Maria's leadership skills were being tested in ways that no training exercise could fully prepare her for. As she assessed her options, Maria realized that conventional tactics were insufficient for the current situation. The enemy's defensive preparation, urban terrain, and civilian constraints created a tactical puzzle that required innovative thinking rather than standard operational procedures. Her decision in the next few minutes would determine not only mission success or failure, but the lives of every ranger under her command. The acrid smell of cordite and concrete dust filled Maria's nostrils as she pressed herself against the crumbling wall of what had once been a corner shop. Her tactical radio crackled with increasingly desperate reports from her squad leaders, each voice betraying the stress of prolonged combat. Ammunition was running low across all positions, medical supplies were being consumed treating wounds, and enemy fire was becoming more accurate as fighters adjusted their aim points. The situation had reached a critical juncture. Continuing the current engagement would likely result in casualties that Maria couldn't accept, but withdrawal would abandon the mission objective and potentially allow enemy forces to strengthen their position. Worse yet, intelligence reports suggested that enemy reinforcements were moving toward their location, threatening to surround her rangers in a tactical nightmare that could result in total mission failure. Through her rifle scope, Maria observed enemy movement patterns that revealed both strengths and vulnerabilities in their defensive setup. The fighters were well disciplined and obviously experienced, but their positions were static and dependent on maintaining observation of American movements. This observation requirement might provide the opportunity she needed to change the tactical dynamic of the engagement. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cut through the radio chatter with a report that crystallized her thinking. His Overwatch position had excellent visibility of enemy positions, but he was also completely exposed to return fire from multiple directions. Several enemy fighters had been attempting to maneuver closer to his building, obviously planning to assault his position directly rather than continue the long-range firefight. If his Overwatch position was compromised, her entire tactical situation would collapse. The solution came to her, with the sudden clarity that sometimes accompanies moments of extreme stress. Maria's equipment included smoke canisters that were standard issue for concealing movement, but she realized they could be employed in a more creative, tactical application. Instead of using smoke defensively to cover withdrawal, she could use it offensively to blind enemy observation while her rangers maneuvered into more advantageous positions. The plan required precise timing and coordination between all elements of her force. Maria would need to communicate her intentions clearly while maintaining operational security over radio channels that enemy forces might be monitoring. The margin for error was minimal, and any mistaken execution could result in friendly fire incidents or leave her rangers exposed in positions worse than their current situation. Corporal Johnson's expertise with communications equipment became crucial as Maria outlined her plan to her squad leaders. He established encrypted channels and coordinated timing signals that would allow simultaneous actions across all positions without alerting enemy fighters to their intentions. His technical skills created the foundation for tactical surprise that might shift the momentum of the engagement. The smoke plan required her rangers to move immediately after smoke deployment, before enemy fighters could adjust their defensive positions or call for their own supporting fires. Maria designated specific movement routes for each element, ensuring that their paths wouldn't intersect and create potential fratricide situations. Each ranger needed to understand exactly where they were going and what they were expected to accomplish once they reached their new positions. Private First Class Thompson, despite his shoulder wound, volunteered to remain in his current position and provide covering fire during the movement. His sacrifice would draw enemy attention while his teammates advanced, but it also exposed him to increased risk from return fire. Maria accepted his offer because tactical necessity sometimes requires difficult decisions about individual versus unit survival. The psychological aspect of smoke employment was as important as its physical effects. Enemy fighters who had maintained observation of American positions would suddenly find themselves blind, creating anxiety and uncertainty that might cause them to make tactical mistakes. This psychological pressure, combined with the physical displacement of Maria's forces, could create the confusion necessary for tactical success. Maria's watch showed 11:47 hours as she made the final decision to execute the smoke plan. Her rangers had been in continuous contact with enemy forces for over 2 hours, and their tactical position was becoming less sustainable with each passing minute. The arrival of enemy reinforcements would tip the balance decisively against her small force, making immediate action essential regardless of the risks involved. The first smoke canister deployment was Maria's personal responsibility. She pulled the pin and threw the cylinder into the intersection, where it immediately began producing thick white smoke that billowed upward and spread laterally across the urban landscape. The prevailing wind carried the smoke toward enemy positions exactly as she had calculated during her brief planning phase. Additional smoke canisters followed from positions throughout her defensive perimeter, creating a smoke screen that effectively blinded enemy observation of the entire engagement area. The sound of confused shouting in Arabic indicated that enemy fighters were struggling to maintain awareness of American positions, exactly the tactical effect Maria had intended to create. The movement phase began immediately after smoke deployment reached maximum effectiveness. Maria's rangers advanced through the urban maze with practiced precision, using predetermined routes that took advantage of terrain features and building layouts. Each ranger understood their destination and tactical responsibility, eliminating the need for radio communication that might compromise their positions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's Overwatch team used the smoke concealment to relocate from their exposed position to a building that provided better protection while maintaining observation capabilities. The movement was dangerous because enemy fighters were firing blindly into the smoke, hoping to hit advancing Americans through area saturation rather than aimed fire. Several bullets passed close enough to Rodriguez's position that he could hear their passage. The new tactical positions that Maria's rangers occupied provided significant advantages over their previous locations. Instead of being pinned down in defensive positions, they now had opportunities for offensive action against enemy positions that had been identified during the earlier phase of the engagement. The smokescreen had effectively reset the tactical situation in America's favor. Corporal Martinez, now positioned in a building that overlooked the enemy command position, had a clear shot at the figures with radio equipment that he had identified earlier. His precision rifle shot eliminated what appeared to be the enemy leader, immediately causing confusion in their defensive coordination. The tactical impact was evident as enemy fire became less coordinated and more sporadic. The smoke began to dissipate after approximately 10 minutes, revealing a completely changed battlefield dynamic. Enemy fighters found themselves observed and targeted from positions they hadn't expected, while American overwatchers now had clear fields of fire on previously protected enemy locations. The tactical initiative had shifted decisively in favor of Maria's rangers. However, the success of the smoke plan also created new challenges that required immediate attention. Some enemy fighters had used the smoke concealment to attempt flanking maneuvers against American positions, and Maria's rangers now needed to deal with threats from directions that hadn't been covered in the original defensive plan. The urban environment created numerous approaches that were difficult to monitor simultaneously. Private Lopez, their medic, used the tactical pause to move between positions and check on wounded rangers. In addition to Thompson's shoulder wound, 2 other rangers had suffered minor injuries from concrete fragments and ricochets. None of the wounds were life-threatening, but they reduced combat effectiveness and required ongoing medical attention that diverted resources from offensive operations. The radio report to base operations reflected the changed tactical situation and Maria's assessment of current capabilities. Her Rangers had successfully disrupted enemy defensive positions and gained tactical initiative, but they were still outnumbered and facing the possibility of enemy reinforcements. The mission to secure the intersection remained achievable, but would require additional support or tactical innovation to complete successfully. Colonel Davidson's response indicated that higher command recognized both the tactical success achieved through the smoke plan and the ongoing challenges facing her Rangers. Additional resources were being allocated to support her mission, including priority for close air support and coordination with other ground units operating in the area. The tactical innovation that Maria had demonstrated was being noted for potential application in similar situations. As the smoke completely cleared, Maria assessed her Rangers' new positions and began planning the next phase of operations. The enemy defensive network had been disrupted but not destroyed, and several positions remained capable of interfering with mission completion. The tactical success of the smoke plan had created opportunities, but capitalizing on those opportunities would require continued aggressive leadership and tactical innovation. The sound of distant helicopter rotors indicated that medical evacuation was becoming available for wounded Rangers, but Maria faced the difficult decision of whether to evacuate casualties or retain every available fighter for mission completion. Each wounded Ranger represented both a tactical asset and a human being whose welfare was her responsibility, creating the kind of leadership dilemma that defines combat command. The intersection that had been a battlefield just hours earlier was now bustling with coalition activity, as engineers worked to establish permanent defensive positions and supply routes. Maria Santos stood on the rooftop where Staff Sergeant Williams had provided overwatch support, surveying the scene below while processing the events that had transformed a routine mission into something extraordinary. The official casualty report showed 3 Rangers wounded, with Private First Class Thompson and Sergeant Peterson requiring extended medical treatment. Both men were expected to make full recoveries, but their injuries served as sobering reminders of the price paid for tactical success. Maria had visited both in the field hospital before returning to assess the aftermath of their engagement. Coalition intelligence officers were conducting detailed assessments of the enemy positions that her Rangers had captured, revealing defensive preparations that were far more sophisticated than initial estimates had suggested. The underground tunnel network extended throughout several city blocks, creating a defensive complex that could have threatened coalition operations for weeks if it hadn't been neutralized during their assault. The enemy casualty count remained uncertain, as many fighters had withdrawn during the final phase of fighting, but at least 15 confirmed enemy dead were recovered from various positions around the intersection. More importantly, the capture of enemy equipment and documents provided intelligence value that extended far beyond the immediate tactical success of securing the crossroads. Colonel Davidson arrived by helicopter that afternoon to personally assess the situation and debrief Maria on the tactical innovations that had made mission success possible. His initial questions focused on the smokescreen employment and underground assault coordination, tactics that weren't covered in standard operating procedures but had proven decisive in this urban environment. The debriefing revealed that Maria's tactical decisions were being studied by higher command levels as potential doctrine modifications for future urban operations. The combination of smoke employment for offensive rather than defensive purposes and the creative use of utility infrastructure for assault routes represented tactical thinking that could benefit other units facing similar challenges. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the medical tent after treatment for minor injuries sustained during the underground fighting, his uniform torn and blackened but his spirits high. His leadership of the tunnel assault had been crucial to overall mission success, and his tactical adaptability under extreme conditions exemplified the Ranger standards that made such operations possible. The media attention that followed was something Maria had not anticipated. Military journalists were documenting the tactical innovations employed during the engagement, and her leadership under fire was being highlighted as an example of non-commissioned officer excellence. However, Maria remained focused on her Rangers' welfare rather than personal recognition. Private Lopez received a commendation for his medical performance under fire, having treated multiple casualties while maintaining his combat effectiveness throughout the engagement. His ability to provide medical care while participating in tactical operations reflected the multidisciplinary training that made Rangers effective in complex scenarios. The strategic impact of securing the intersection became apparent within days as coalition supply convoys began using the route to support operations throughout the region. What had been a tactical objective for Maria's Rangers had strategic implications that affected the broader war effort, justifying the risks and costs associated with their mission. The intelligence gathered from captured enemy documents revealed that the intersection had been part of a larger defensive network designed to isolate coalition forces and disrupt supply operations. Maria's Rangers had unknowingly prevented a significant enemy offensive that could have changed the tactical situation throughout the entire area of operations. Recognition for the tactical success came in multiple forms over the following weeks. Maria received the Silver Star for exceptional leadership under fire, while several of her Rangers received Bronze Stars and Purple Hearts for their performance during the engagement. However, the personal satisfaction of successful mission completion meant more to Maria than any formal recognition. The tactical lessons learned during the engagement were compiled into training materials that would be used to prepare future Rangers for urban combat scenarios. Maria's innovative employment of smokescreens and coordination of multi-level assaults became case studies in tactical flexibility and creative problem-solving under pressure. The wounded Rangers made steady recoveries, with both Thompson and Peterson expressing eagerness to return to their unit as soon as medical authorities cleared them for duty. Their dedication to their teammates and mission reflected the esprit de corps that made Ranger units capable of accomplishing missions that seemed impossible under conventional analysis. Staff Sergeant Williams was promoted to Sergeant First Class in recognition of his exceptional performance as an Overwatch sniper during the engagement. His precision fire had been crucial at multiple phases of the operation, and his tactical awareness had prevented enemy reinforcements from overwhelming American positions during critical moments. The relationship between Maria and her Rangers was strengthened by their shared combat experience and mutual trust developed under fire. The tactical challenges they had overcome together created bonds that would benefit unit cohesion and effectiveness in future operations, regardless of whatever missions they might face. Coalition forces continued to hold and improve the intersection position, eventually establishing a permanent forward operating base that enhanced security throughout the region. The tactical success achieved by Maria's Rangers had strategic consequences that extended far beyond their original mission parameters. The enemy tunnel network was thoroughly mapped and either sealed or converted for coalition use, eliminating a threat that could have compromised security throughout the urban area. The intelligence value of these discoveries contributed to successful operations conducted by other coalition units over the following months. Maria's leadership philosophy was influenced by the lessons learned during the intersection battle. Her experience demonstrated that tactical success often required abandoning standard procedures in favor of creative solutions adapted to specific circumstances. This flexibility became a hallmark of her leadership style in subsequent operations. The Rangers who had participated in the engagement were recognized as having exceptional combat experience that qualified them for leadership positions within their respective specialties. Several were selected for promotion or assignment to training positions where they could share their knowledge with other Rangers preparing for deployment. The tactical innovations developed during the battle were incorporated into Ranger training programs, ensuring that future Rangers would be prepared to employ similar techniques when facing comparable challenges. Maria's contributions to tactical doctrine extended her impact beyond the immediate success of her mission. Years later, military historians would study the intersection battle as an example of small unit leadership and tactical innovation under extreme conditions. Maria's decisions during those critical hours became subjects for military education programs designed to develop future leaders capable of similar performance under pressure. The personal cost of combat leadership was something Maria continued to process long after the physical wounds had healed and the official recognition had been received. The responsibility for her Rangers' lives and welfare remained her primary concern, overshadowing any personal achievements or career benefits that resulted from the mission. The intersection that had been the scene of intense combat was eventually incorporated into a thriving commercial district as the region stabilized and civilian life returned to normal. Children played in streets where Rangers had fought for their lives, a transformation that validated the strategic purpose behind their tactical sacrifices. Maria Santos returned to the United States after completing her deployment, carrying with her the knowledge that leadership under fire had revealed capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. The smoke-filled intersection, where she had made split-second decisions that saved lives and accomplished an impossible mission, had changed her understanding of what leadership truly meant. The Rangers who had served under her command during that engagement remained connected through the shared experience of combat and mutual respect developed under the most challenging circumstances. Their tactical success had been achieved through collective effort and individual sacrifice, creating bonds that would endure long after their military service concluded. The lessons learned from that smoke-filled morning continued to influence tactical thinking and leadership development throughout the military, ensuring that Maria's innovations would benefit future Rangers facing similar challenges in defense of American interests around the world.